It is 3:11 in the morning. You did not set an alarm. Nothing fell over. Nobody called your name. And yet here you are, eyes wide open in the dark, staring at a ceiling you cannot even see. Your first thought is that something woke you. The real answer is far stranger. Nothing woke you. You were always going to wake up. And the reason has almost nothing to do with tonight and almost everything to do with a version of sleep your species practiced for tens of thousands of years before anyone invented a bedroom. Start with the thing nobody tells you. You do not sleep in one piece. You never have. Sleep is not a switch that flips down at midnight and back up at 7. It is a cycle, and it runs on a loop roughly every 90 minutes, all night long, whether you notice it or not. We have known this since the early 1950s. In a lab at the University of Chicago, a physiologist named Nathaniel Kleitman and his graduate student Eugene Azarinsky wired sleeping people to machines that recorded eye movement and brain activity. What they found rewrote sleep science overnight. The sleeping brain was not switched off. It was climbing up and down through distinct stages, over and over, and at certain points the eyes darted rapidly beneath closed lids, while the brain lit up almost as brightly as it does when you are awake. That was the discovery of REM sleep, rapid eye movement, the stage where most vivid dreaming happens. And here's the part that matters for you at 3:11 in the morning. Between those cycles, at the seams where one stage hands off to the next, you surface. You come close to waking. Sometimes you cross the line completely. You do this several times a night, every night. So does everyone you know. You just do not remember it. Memory formation is largely offline during sleep, so a 10-second awakening leaves no trace at all. You roll over, you sink back down, and the whole thing is erased before it can become a memory. So the question is not why you woke up. You wake up constantly. The question is why this one stuck. To answer that, you have to look at what your body is doing in the small hours, because it is not idling. It is running a schedule. Deep inside your brain, just above where your optic nerves cross, sits a cluster of about 20,000 neurons called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. Think of it as the master clock in your skull. It takes its cue from light hitting your eyes, and it uses that information to set the timing for almost everything else in your body. That clock is why your body temperature is not constant. It drops through the night, bottoming out in the small hours, a couple of hours before your usual wake time, coldest point of the entire 24-hour day. That clock is why melatonin, the hormone that signals darkness to the rest of your body, peaks in the middle of the night rather than at bedtime. And that clock is why, hours before your alarm, something starts climbing: cortisol. You have probably heard cortisol called the stress hormone, which is true but incomplete. Cortisol is also your body's ignition sequence. It mobilizes fuel, raises blood pressure, and sharpens attention, and it does not wait for you to open your eyes. It begins rising in the last stretch of the night and continues surging in the first 30 minutes after you wake, a pattern researchers call the cortisol awakening response. So picture the state you are actually in at 3 in the morning. You are at your coldest. You are melatonin saturated, and a hormone whose entire job is to prepare a body for action has already started pouring into your bloodstream. You are not lying awake for no reason. You are lying awake inside a chemical shift change. But that still does not explain why it feels the way it does, because 3 a.m. does not feel like a neutral awakening. It feels like a verdict. Hold that thought, because we need to go back about 400 years first. In the 1990s, a psychiatrist at the National Institute of Mental Health named Thomas Ware ran an experiment that sounds almost too simple to be important. He took volunteers and removed artificial light from their nights. For weeks, they spent 14 hours a night in darkness, which is roughly what a human winter looked like before electricity. Their sleep changed, not slightly, structurally. After a few weeks, the single consolidated block most modern people take for granted broke apart. Sleep separated into 2 bouts, with an interval of quiet wakefulness sitting between them, sometimes lasting an hour or more. The volunteers were not distressed by it. They described the state as calm, meditative, close to trance. And during that gap, Ware's team measured elevated levels of prolactin, a hormone associated with states of restful, still contentment. Their bodies had not malfunctioned. Their bodies had reverted. Around the same time, a historian at Virginia Tech named Roger Ekirch was combing through pre-industrial documents for an entirely different project. Diaries, court depositions, medical texts, novels. And he kept tripping over the same odd phrase, first sleep and second sleep. He eventually gathered hundreds of references across centuries of European sources, describing something ordinary enough that nobody bothered to explain it. People went to bed not long after dark. They slept. They woke in the small hours. And then, for a while, they simply existed. They prayed. They talked to whoever was beside them. They tended the fire, checked on animals, thought about their dreams, and then they went back down for a second sleep until dawn. Nobody panicked. Nobody reached for a device. Nobody lay there calculating how many hours remained. There was no word for insomnia in that world, because a gap in the night was not a symptom. It was just the middle of the night. Now, honesty matters here. Historians still argue about how universal this pattern really was, and whether it describes all pre-modern people or mostly cold, dark, northern European winters. This is a strong hypothesis, not a closed case, but the pairing is hard to ignore. A historian finds a two-part night in the written record. A sleep scientist recreates a long, dark night in a lab and watches a two-part night reassemble itself in modern bodies, which raises an uncomfortable possibility. The thing you are treating as a malfunction may be a feature you inherited and then buried under a light bulb. So why does it feel so catastrophic? That comes down to which brain wakes up. The second half of your night is REM heavy. The proportions shift as the night goes on, so your deepest, most restorative slow-wave sleep is loaded into the early hours, and REM stretches longer and longer toward morning, which means when you wake at 3, you are very often surfacing out of or right beside a REM period. And REM is a genuinely bizarre neurochemical state. Noradrenaline, the alertness and vigilance chemical, drops to almost nothing. Meanwhile, the emotional regions of your brain, including the amygdala, the small almond-shaped alarm bell buried in each temporal lobe, remain highly active. And the prefrontal cortex, the region just behind your forehead that handles planning, perspective, and impulse control, is substantially quieter. Now wake someone out of that. The alarm system is warm and running. The part of you that provides context, proportion, and the sentence, "This can wait until morning," is still buffering. Sleep researchers call that lag sleep inertia, and it can persist for many minutes after your eyes open. So at 3 in the morning, you are, functionally, an emotional brain without its editor. This is not a metaphor. In 2007, a team led by Sung-Shik Yu and Matthew Walker at Berkeley scanned people looking at emotionally negative images after a night of sleep deprivation. The amygdala responses were dramatically amplified compared to rested controls, and the functional connection between the amygdala and the regulating regions of the prefrontal cortex was markedly weakened. The alarm was louder. The hand on the volume dial had let go. That is why the thought that arrives at 3 a.m. arrives with total confidence. The email you sent, the thing you said in 2011, the lump, the money, the person. At 3 in the morning, these are not worries, they are conclusions. And at 8 in the morning, over coffee, in exactly the same body, with exactly the same facts, they are somehow just Tuesday. Nothing changed except which parts of you were online. There is one more layer, and it is the one that turns a normal night into a nightly one. Researchers, including Michael Perlis at the University of Pennsylvania, have described insomnia less as a lack of sleepiness and more as a state of hyperarousal, a nervous system that is running too hot to let go. And crucially, arousal can be learned. The first few times you lie awake, it is biology. But if every awakening is met with frustration, clock checking, and the mental arithmetic of how wrecked you will be tomorrow, your brain starts building an association. Bed becomes the place where the panic happens. Then the bed itself becomes the trigger, and the trap closes, because sleep is one of the very few things in your life that gets further away the harder you chase it. You cannot try to fall asleep. Effort is arousal. Arousal is wakefulness, which means the single worst thing you can do at 3 a.m. is care very much about it being 3 a.m. So where does the pattern come from? Why would evolution build a species that keeps popping the hood in the middle of the night? Consider what a sleeping group actually is. A cluster of large, soft, slow mammals, unconscious, in the dark, for 8 hours on a landscape that contained things that hunted at night. Every hour that entire group is simultaneously unconscious is an hour nobody is watching. In 2017, an anthropologist named David Sampson and his colleagues published a study of the Hadza, a hunter-gatherer community in northern Tanzania. They fitted volunteers with actigraphy monitors and tracked their sleep across 20 days and nights of ordinary life. Then they looked for the windows in which every single monitored adult was asleep at the same time. Across more than 200 hours of observation, they found about 18 minutes. 18. Not per night, total. Not because anyone was standing guard. Nobody was assigned a shift. It was simply that people differed. Older adults drifted awake early. Younger adults stayed up late. Individual variation in sleep timing meant that somewhere in that camp, at almost any hour of the night, somebody's eyes were open. Sampson's team called it a sentinel effect, and they proposed something quietly beautiful about it. That the variation in human sleep timing, the early birds and the night owls, and the person who reliably surfaces at 3, might not be a set of individual quirks at all. It might be a group-level trait. A watch rota nobody has to organize because it is built into the spread. Again, this is a hypothesis, not a proven law, but it reframes the thing in your hands. You are not broken at 3 a.m. You may be doing a job. The problem is that the job was designed for a camp, a fire, and other people. And you are doing it alone, in a dark box, holding a device that will happily show you the news. So tonight, when it happens, understand what is actually in the room with you. A clock in your skull hitting its coldest hour. A hormone beginning its climb toward morning. An emotional brain awake before its editor. A sleep pattern older than agriculture, briefly reasserting itself. And a very old instinct, quietly checking that everything is still fine. Nothing has gone wrong. Something has gone right at the wrong address. It is 3:11 in the morning. You did not set an alarm. Nothing fell over. Nobody called your name. Somebody just took the watch. And it was you.